Welcome to Module 14, Localization, about the Genero Report Writer 2.21. At the end of this instruction, you're going to be able to create a localized string file and set up your project or application to use this localized string file. You can set it up on a user-by-user basis. The following are the steps that you need to complete in order to localize your application. You have to create a localized string file. It's going to be named filename.str, and it's going to contain your translations. You compile the str file, and it creates a 42s file in the target directory. And it is the 42s file that your application uses when it comes time to localize. You then need to update your FGL profile to identify or point to your localized string file. And you update your FGL profile just as you've done with other Genero applications by setting the FGL run localization file count to point to the number of localized files you have, and to set the FGL run localization file number name to point to your 42s file. When you're localizing static text, and that's text that you have entered directly, text that's not dynamic or not created based upon the variables being passed in, the method that you use to do this is you first have the text identified. So in our example up here, our text says state space name. This is the string that's going to need to be localized. So in my localized string file, my str file, I need to provide an entry for this exact string. So I would say state space name is equal to, and then the value that I want it to localize. Here I'm just using name of state, but if you were localizing to a different language, you would have the translation in quotes inside of your str file. When it comes time to run, if the localized box is checked, then it's going to translate that for you so that it uses the localized string instead of the string defined in the text field. If you're localizing dynamic text that's being brought in according to your RTL expression, then the text property, it's dynamic. Here we have the text being defined as the value for the data.orders.promo field. What you need to do is in your localized string file, you need to provide an entry for each possible unique value. So in this example, our values are either going to be a y or they're going to be an n, and you need to provide the translation for y and the translation for n. Once these are defined in your string file and your string file is compiled, if you check the localized text checkbox, when it comes time to produce the report, it's going to look up the R2L expression value in our 42s file, and it's going to output that to the report. An alternate way of localizing dynamic text, some of the steps are the same. You still specify for your text field this RTL expression. Here again, it's data.orders.promo. You still have to create your str file, your string file, to provide the translation for every possible unique value. You need to compile the str file. But instead of checking localized text, an alternate way is to edit your RTL expression so that it includes the translate method. So here my data.orders.promo.translate indicates that it's going to need to be translated. And the result is going to look up the RTL expression in the 42s file and once again provide the localized value on your report itself. So searching for that string resource file in the 42s files follows this order of preference. First, the files defined in the FGL profile. Next, a file having the same name prefix as the current .4RP report. Then a file having the same name prefix as the current 42R program. And finally, a file with the name default.42s. For each string file, the runtime system searches in the following directories. It'll first look in the current directory, then the path listed by the DB path environment variable, then the path listed by the FGL resource path environment variable, and finally the FGL dir/lib directory. Let's go ahead and look at an example of localization. To do this localization, I'm going to create a new report. I'm going to create a list report. On my list report, let me go ahead and save this. And I'm going to save it in the bin subdirectory. And I'm going to save it with the name promo list. I will go ahead and add this to my reports folder. And now I have my promo list appearing in my reports virtual folder. Before I go any further, I'm also going to change my report main. In the report main, let me remove some old functions, but I'm going to change it so it's looking at my promo list when it executes. On my promo list, let me bring in my data view. I open my data view, and now I'm going to go ahead and add some column headers, and I'm going to add some fields to my promo list. So underneath my table header, I'm going to go ahead and add a table column title object, and I'm going to add promo, and I'm going to add it twice. So as we can see, the text that it's going to be providing is going to be the text of promo. The next thing I'm going to do is find my table row, and in table row, I'm going to add a table column value object. And again, I'm going to add the promo twice. If I look inside of my table row now, I can see that it's added the text, and this time it's dynamic of data.orders.promo. Inside of my report, I need to now place my triggers inside of my report. So I'm going to take the store number trigger, and I'm going to place it on the page root. I'm going to now take my table row, and I'm going to place it underneath the on every row trigger. Let me save my changes, and let me execute my report. The report executes, and as you can see, I have two promo columns, and they have the identical data out there. So the first thing we're going to look at is creating a localization of the static text that appears on the report of promo. So I first need to create a localized string file. I'm going to go ahead and put it inside this src directory. I do a file new. This is going to be a Genero resources file, and it's going to be a localized string, or an str. You see that it opens up an empty document inside of code editor. I now need to provide the information for my localized string. So we saw that it put out the string itself as promo, and I'm going to make that localized to say promotion. I can save this. I'm going to save it as my promo list.str, and I'm going to include it inside of my src. Let me go ahead and compile. When I compile the file, it says it's compiled. To verify that it's compiled, I would have to go into Explorer. And inside my bin directory, I can see that it's added a promolist.42s file. So I know it's been compiled, and it's available for my report to use. I now want to update my FGL profile to point to this localized string file. So let me go back into Studio. I'm going to go ahead and open my FGL profile. I open my FGL profile, and I need to add values for localized strings. The values I'm adding are fglrun dot localization dot file dot count. I have one file, so I'm going to set my count equal to 1. I'm going to add fglrun dot localization dot file dot 1 dot name to be equal to, in this case, promolist.42s. Let me save the changes to my FGL profile. And now let me go back into my report. Inside of the report, I need to go and identify this column header. And I have the localized text checked. For the second field, let's just uncheck it and see if we can compare what happens when we run our application now. I execute my application. And you can see the column that I asked to be localized states promotion, while the column that I did not ask to be localized maintains its original static text of promo. Let's go now and look at ways of translating the values that come in. So I have to go back to my string file. In my string file, I know my valid values are either going to be an N or they're going to be a Y. I need to provide localized text for it, so I'm going to provide non for N, and I'm going to provide oui for yes, or for Y. I save my changes. I'm going to go ahead and recompile the string file. Now that the string file is compiled, I can go back to my promo list report, and let me look down at the table row itself. Underneath the table row, if we go down, we'll see that the checkbox for both of these is not selected. Let's go ahead and for the first data.orders.promo, let me go ahead and check localized text. Let me save my changes, and let me execute my application. The report is generated, and for the column that I asked for localization, we can see it's provided the localized values of non or oui instead of providing N or Y. For the second column now, let's go and use the alternate method. So instead of data.orders.promo, I can open up my RTL expression editor, and I want to provide a translate function. I find translate, I need to enclose the brackets, I get my expression okay. So even though I don't have it checked, I've asked for it to be translated. Let me save my changes, and once again execute my report. And this time we can see it's used that alternate method of the translate method to provide me with my non and my oui values. This ends our discussion of localization of your Genero reports.